Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye holds her first one-on-one summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Seoul. We have a special report. South Korea and the United States hold their annual security meeting in Seoul. The talks are centered around bolstering their alliance in the face of North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Plus, a top aviation official says the Russian plane that crashed in Egypt broke up in midair. Some airlines are now refusing to fly over the Sinai Peninsula. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 2nd of November. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we begin at the nation's top office, where President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe have just wrapped up their first ever bilateral summit. For more on what was discussed and what to expect for South Korea-Japan relations going forward, we cross to our Hwang Sang-hee at the presidential office of Cheongwade. So, Sang-hee, there has been a lot of focus on this summit since it was confirmed. How did it go?
Hi, Mark. The summit ended just about 15 minutes ago, but no details have been released yet. But the two leaders probably had a lot on their agenda, as this is, like you said, their first summit since both of them took office. Perhaps the greatest attention is on whether they made any progress on the issue of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. Now, this has been the thorniest subject between the two countries, as Seoul seeks a sincere apology and compensation from Tokyo, but Japan continues to say the issue was resolved decades ago. Opening the talks, President Park expressed hopes that the summit will be a valuable opportunity to heal the wounds of the past and to advance their bilateral relations. Prime Minister Abe said that he had always been open to dialogue with President Park and added that today's summit is very significant for both Korean and Japanese people. But aside from the issue of history, the two sides are expected to reaffirm their commitment to continue their security and economic cooperation. Mark?
Now, Sang-hee, relations between Seoul and Tokyo have been very frosty for a long time now, but considering we've had this summit today, can we expect things to warm up a little bit down the road?
Well, like I said, I think much of that depends on how much the two leaders were able to close in on the issue of the comfort women, but the expectation is rather low on any substantial progress in their bilateral relations following the summit. Also, even before the summit took place, the two sides were haggling over issues like the date and the agenda of the talks. There is no joint press conference, no joint statement, at least for now, nor are the leaders dining together. In fact, Abe is expected to speak to reporters separately at a hotel after the summit. The Korean government explained that this is customary as the summit is being held on the sidelines of a trilateral meeting, but considering that this is the first summit between President Park and Abe and also Abe's very first visit to Korea in 9 years, this clearly reflects the current status of Korea-Japan relations and sort of gives us an idea of what to expect down the road. Mark?
Well, thank you very much, Sang-hee, for your comprehensive report. That was our Hwang Sang-hee on the South Korea-Japan summit, reporting live from the presidential office. Now, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang's trip to Seoul for a series of meetings with President Park and other senior South Korean officials appears to have further cemented the two countries' flourishing relations. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is on a much tighter schedule, but Premier Li made sure to press Tokyo on his past wrongdoings during his talks with Abe on Sunday. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Song Ji-son has the details.
We have agreed to face the past, the future, and deal with all sensitive issues, including our shared history. Our goal is a sound and stable development in all aspects, including trilateral cooperation and bilateral relations. We will work toward integrating the regional economy and establishing peace and stability in the region.
Chinese Premier Li Keqiang did not hesitate to call on Japan to address thorny issues, namely Japan's wartime atrocities that were not directly addressed during the trilateral talks. Beijing also sought to make the most out of the bilateral summit, touching upon ways to enhance economic cooperation, in particular boosting trade pacts on multiple levels. Lee then paid a visit to Korea's parliament, where he urged National Assembly Speaker Chung Eui-hwa to accelerate the ratification of the Korea-China FTA and other related bills. Compared to Abe, who's only on a 30-hour working level visit, Lee was officially invited by President Park Geun-hye. On this last day of his visit on Monday, Lee sat down with Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-won and spoke with young leaders from Korea and China. Seoul and Beijing are enjoying stronger bilateral ties than ever, as highlighted by President Park's attendance at Beijing's military parade in September and Premier Lee's visit to Seoul this month. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, turning to the annual South Korea-US Security Consultative Meeting in Seoul. They've been having discussions, the defense chiefs of those two nations, on a variety of defense issues, and North Korea, of course, being at the top of the agenda. For more, we connect with Connie Kim at the Defense Ministry. So, Connie, can you tell us more about the discussions, especially in regard to North Korea?
Well, Mark, South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-gu and his U.S. counterpart Ashton Carter have wrapped up their talks and are expected to hold a joint press briefing in about 10 minutes' time. Now, the two are believed to have evaluated the gravity of threats coming from North Korea and come up with ways to counter North Korea's missile and nuclear threats. As you know, with the test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile last May and the modified KN-08 intercontinental missile revealed at the military parade last month, threats from North Korea have been escalating. Meanwhile, both Han and Carter may reaffirm their plan to develop Seoul's missile defense systems, kill chain and the Korea Air Missile Defense System against North Korea's missile threats by mid-2020. But however, Seoul's defense ministry says talks over the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, a U.S.-led advanced missile defense system, was not up for talks. Speculation of possible THAAD talks had been brewing after a Lockheed Martin official said official and non-official talks over THAAD were underway between Seoul and Washington. The two allies are also expected to reaffirm a plan to delay the handover of Washington-led wartime operational control of South Korean troops, which Seoul and Washington agreed to at last year's security talks. Cooperation on space, cyberspace, and regional and global security were also expected to be on their agenda. Mark?
And Connie, Ashton Carter arrived on Sunday and visited the Inter-Korean Military Demarcation Line, DMZ. What message did he convey there?
Well, the U.S. Defense Chief Ashton Carter called on North Korea to end its nuclear weapons program at the demilitarized zone. Now, remember, this was the defense chief's first visit to the truce village of Panmunjom on Sunday. While there, he also urged Pyongyang to rejoin the six-party nuclear talks involving the two Koreas, U.S., China, and Russia, Japan and Russia. The talks have been stalled since late 2008 when Pyongyang walked away from the negotiating table. Carter leaves for Malaysia on Tuesday to attend an ASEAN defense ministers meeting where he's expected to exchange a range of defense ideas with member nations. Reporting live from Seoul's defense ministry, this has been Connie Kim.
Now, in other news, members of the National Assembly's Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee crossed the border Monday to visit the ruins of an ancient royal palace in the North Korean city of Kaesong. Nearly 50 people, including 16 committee members and selected government officials from the Ministry of Unification, will visit the Manwoldae Palace ruins, which gained UNESCO World Heritage listing back in 2013. They will also inspect nearby excavation sites. Now, since 2007, the two Koreas have conducted joint excavations and research of the ruins in Kaesong, the ancient capital of the Goryeo dynasty, which lasted from the 10th to the late 14th century. The group plans on returning to South Korea at around 4 p.m. this afternoon. A two-day parliamentary review of economic ministries began on this Monday and shows signs of a fierce battle ensuing, with rival parties already in conflict over plans for a state-authored history textbook and Seoul's failure to gain the transfer of some key combat jet technology from Washington. During a National Assembly Budget and Accounts Committee general meeting, rival parties clashed over the already allocated $4 million in reserve funds for the estimated $8.7 million cost to publish the secondary education history textbooks. The plans themselves do not require parliamentary approval, but to implement the bill, the government must seek endorsement to spend taxpayers' money. The ruling Saenuri party hopes to finish legislative review of the government's nearly $340 billion budget for next year and pass the bill by the legal deadline of November 30th. Now, investigators are beginning the task of examining the 2 black boxes on board a Russian passenger plane that crashed in Egypt, killing more than 200 people. In Russia, a 3-day period of national mourning is already underway. Son Jung-in reports.
Plane fragments and the bodies of the victims have been found scattered over a large area in the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula. Russian aviation authorities have released a preliminary result after visiting the crash site. Evidence seems to show the aircraft broke apart in midair.
The site of the crash occupies a very large territory, more than 20 square kilometers. All the signs show that the plane broke up in the air on a great altitude.
Other officials made similar assessments but refrained from giving out any more details, saying it was too early to determine what had caused the disaster. A team of international experts has begun analyzing the contents of the flight's black box recorders that were recovered shortly after the crash. In the meantime, there have been conflicting reports on the plane's condition before it crashed. Egyptian officials initially indicated technical issues were the cause, while dismissing a claim of responsibility issued by the Islamic State militant group. But they later reported there had been no sign of problems on board the flight. The conflicting statements have prompted several international airlines to divert their aircraft from the area for the time being. In Russia, flags are flying at half-staff as the country declared a 3-day period of national mourning. People laid flowers and handwritten notes at the entrance of the airport in St. Petersburg, where the airliner was headed when it crashed 23 minutes after takeoff from Sharm el-Sheikh, killing all 224 people on board. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, Korea logged a current account surplus for the 43rd consecutive month in September, extending its record-long period in the black for another month. According to the Bank of Korea on Monday, the surplus reached $10.6 billion in September. This is a significant gain from a surplus of about $7.5 billion in the same month last year. The rise was largely attributed to falling imports outpacing a drop in exports. Exports slipped nearly 11% on year, while imports plunged over 23%. Korea's exports have fallen every month since the beginning of the year. South Koreans were the second longest hours in the OECD, but not as many as Mexicans, who top that list. OECD data showed Monday that the average South Korean worked 2,124 hours last year. That's up 45 hours from a year earlier. And these include all salaried, self-employed and part-time workers. The hours worked are considerably higher than the OECD average of 1,770 hours per year. In fact, Koreans work 1.6 times longer than the average German worker, who works the least hours in the OECD. Korea used to top the list as the country with the longest working hours until 2007. The average sales price of an imported car in Korea has reached a 5-year high at more than $55,000. The Korea Automobile Importer and Dealer Association attributed the increase to a surge in demand for high-end cars with 100 million won plus, that's $800,000 plus price tags. Almost 180,000 imported cars were sold in Korea in the first 9 months of the year, and that is a big online jump of more than 58%. The average unit price for importers and dealers, though, is only around $30,000, a massive gap of roughly $25,000. Industry watchers blame the excessive margin for imported cars to the skewed distribution channel here in Korea. And Audi Volkswagen Korea says it's going to begin recalls early next year of models affected by an airbag defect. And this is separate, we must stress, from the emissions rigging scandal that has rocked the German auto giant. Almost 28,000 Volkswagen cars produced from 2010 to 2014 will be recalled. The 7 models affected are the Golf, Jetta, CC, Passat, Scirocco, Tiguan and the EOS. Now, the problem is that a spring in the steering wheel assembly could potentially rip a cable that controls the front airbags. A spokesman for the Korean subsidiary said it took time to get the necessary parts, which meant the defect could not be fixed before the end of the year. The company says there have been no reports of accidents or injuries as a result of the defect. Well, those are stories we have for you on this Monday afternoon here in Seoul. Just a reminder that our revamped main nightly news begins tonight at 10 p.m. Korea time. It's called News Center, and your host will be our very own Moon Gon-young. So we do hope you tune in for that. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.